My husband stole my inheritance during a golf trip with his lover, then he had the nerve to call me. Susan Miller stood on the porch of her quaint suburban home, feeling the crisp autumn breeze brush across her cheeks as the late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows over the neighborhood lawns. The air smelled faintly of fallen leaves and wood smoke drifting from a neighbor's chimney. Her fingers tightened around the ceramic mug of herbal tea she held, the heat seeping into her palms, momentarily comforting the cold knot of dread in her stomach. From the outside, everything looked perfectly normal. The rows of tidy houses with white fences, the gentle hum of cars passing by, the distant sound of children laughing as they rode their bicycles along the sidewalk. But inside Susan, a storm was brewing. For most of her life, Susan believed she'd carved out a safe, fulfilling existence. She had built a life with David, her husband of nearly 12 years, filled with quiet moments, shared routines, and the kind of comfortable predictability that made her feel anchored in a world that often felt chaotic. Their small garden, where they'd planted rows of petunias and tomatoes each spring, felt like a shared canvas where they painted their future together. She remembered countless evenings cooking together, sharing laughter over spilled sauce or burnt garlic bread. To anyone looking in from the outside, they were the epitome of a stable couple, devoted and loving. Yet, as the wind rustled the branches overhead, Susan felt as though the leaves were whispering secrets she could no longer ignore. She glanced at her phone for what felt like the 100th time that day, hoping for a message, any message, from David. It had been 3 days since he'd left for his charity golf tournament, and she hadn't heard a word apart from one brief text saying he'd arrived safely. Why wouldn't he call? She wondered. He always calls. Susan first met David Miller at a 4th of July barbecue hosted by mutual friends. She was 28 at the time, a young woman with bright eyes, chestnut brown hair, and an earnest, open demeanor that made people feel instantly at ease. David, 5 years older, was charming, charismatic, and exuded the quiet confidence of a man who knew how to navigate the world, and how to make people like him. He'd worked his way up in the business world, a successful financial consultant who dressed in impeccably tailored suits and carried himself with calm authority. Susan, a middle school art teacher with a soft spot for children and a passion for community projects, was drawn to his magnetic energy and the way he seemed genuinely interested in her dreams and passions. He pursued her with an intensity that left her both dazzled and slightly off balance. He took her to upscale restaurants, sent her flowers just because, and whispered sweet words in her ear that made her heart race. Within a year, they were married. Her friends envied her, telling her how lucky she was to have landed such a kind, attentive husband. Even her parents had approved, charmed by David's impeccable manners and his apparent devotion to Susan. But as Susan stood on her porch that chilly afternoon, staring into the distance, she wondered how much of that was real, and how much had been a carefully constructed illusion. David returned from his golf trip 2 days later. Susan heard the familiar hum of his black Audi pulling into the driveway and felt her heart leap involuntarily. She watched from the kitchen window as he stepped out of the car, looking as composed as ever, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, sunglasses perched atop his head. He opened the trunk and pulled out a golf bag and a small suitcase. He seemed relaxed, even humming softly to himself as he walked up the path. Susan stood frozen by the sink, gripping a dish towel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Hey, sweetheart," David called cheerfully as he stepped through the door. He leaned in to kiss her cheek, but she turned her head slightly, and the kiss landed awkwardly near her ear. David pulled back, brows knitting together in a faint crease. "Everything okay?" Susan forced a smile. "Just tired." He gave her a quick grin. "That's because you work too hard. You need to relax, babe." He brushed past her, heading for the living room. Susan's eyes followed him, sharp and searching, noticing how he avoided looking directly at her. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the shadows the moonlight cast on the ceiling. David slept beside her, breathing evenly, as though completely untroubled. But Susan's mind raced. She thought of the conversation they'd had before he left. "It's just a golf tournament," he'd said breezily, packing his clubs into their case. A good chance to network, raise money for charity. I'll be back before you even miss me. She'd felt a flicker of unease then, but David had smiled and kissed her forehead, and she'd let the worry slide away. After all, he was her husband. The man who held her hand during thunderstorms. The man who remembered her favorite flowers and played silly Christmas music in July just to make her laugh. But now, every memory felt poisoned by a creeping sense of dread. The first true sign that something was wrong came the following week. Susan sat at her desk in the sunlit nook of their home, paying bills and reviewing bank statements, something she did every month. She always took pride in being careful with their finances, an inheritance from her father, who'd taught her that financial security was one of life's greatest shields. As she scrolled through the digital statements, her eyes snagged on several large transfers she didn't recognize. Tens of thousands of dollars moving out of a savings account tied to her inheritance, a fund she'd kept separate since her parents passed away. Her chest tightened painfully. She blinked, convinced she'd misread the figures. But the same transactions stared back at her, cold and undeniable. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. That evening, as they sat at the dinner table, she watched him carefully. David chatted about mundane topics, new golf clubs he wanted, a potential business client, but Susan barely heard him. Her ears roared with the memory of those numbers, the way they'd vanished into unknown accounts. When she couldn't take it anymore, she asked softly, "David, have you made any large transfers from our accounts lately?" He froze for a fraction of a second, so brief most people wouldn't have noticed. But Susan did. Then his face softened into an indulgent smile. "Babe, why are you worrying about money stuff? I'm handling it. Everything's fine." Susan felt her throat tighten. "I'm not sure it is. There's money missing." David's tone turned slightly sharper, though his smile remained in place. "Susan, trust me. Okay? I've got this under control." She stared at him, seeing a stranger where her husband should be. Late that night, while David was in the shower, Susan sat on the edge of their bed, scrolling back through transactions on her phone. Her hands trembled as she traced the money trail, watching her inheritance, her parents' legacy, vanish into unfamiliar accounts. A drop of water fell onto the phone screen. She realized she was crying. "This can't be happening," she thought. "This is David. My David. He'd never." But the evidence was undeniable. Her phone buzzed. A new email arrived from the bank, confirmation of another transfer David had made just the day before. She felt something inside her fracture. The next morning, Susan awoke before dawn, her pillow still damp with tears. She tiptoed downstairs, careful not to wake David, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Slowly, methodically, she began listing every transaction, every date, every suspicious charge. Her hands were steady now, though her heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. "He took my parents' money. He lied. He's been lying for God knows how long." A surge of anger swept through her, hot and scalding. But intertwined with it was something else, a cold determination that began to harden in her chest like steel. She realized then that she would not be the quiet wife swept aside by her husband's deceit. She would find out the truth. She would fight for what was hers. Susan sat at the kitchen table long after the sun rose, her coffee gone cold beside her notebook. She stared at the neat rows of figures she'd written by hand. Each number seemed like a knife wound. Her inheritance, money her parents had left her to feel safe and secure, was disappearing under David's name. Birdsong trickled in from the open window, and somewhere a lawnmower buzzed into life. The normalcy of the world felt obscene. She picked up her phone, fingers hovering over David's contact photo. For a moment, she thought of calling him and demanding the truth, but she dropped the phone as if it had burned her. She wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, she called someone else. "Lisa, it's me. Can you come over?" "Of course, Susan. Are you okay? You sound off. I need you. Please. I'll be there in 20. Lisa Arrington was the kind of woman who inspired confidence just by walking into a room. Sharp, assertive, always impeccably dressed, she'd been Susan's friend since college, and more recently, a lawyer known for her tenacity in the courtroom. Within half an hour, Lisa was standing in Susan's kitchen, a caramel latte in one hand and an expression of intense concern on her face. "Susan, what's going on?" Susan held out the printouts and her scribbled notes. "David, he's taking money. My inheritance. Look at these transfers." Lisa's eyes moved rapidly across the papers. Her expression changed from confusion to disbelief to simmering anger. "Oh my God. How long has this been happening?" "I don't know. At least a few months. Maybe longer." Lisa dropped her voice. "Susan, I'm so sorry. But you can't confront him yet. Not without a plan." Susan blinked. "But he's my husband." Lisa touched her arm gently. "And he's robbing you blind. If you confront him now, he'll cover his tracks even more. We have to be smart." Susan stared at her friend. "How did I get here, Lisa? How did I end up married to a man who'd do this to me?" Lisa's eyes softened. "Because you're trusting. Because you believe people are good. None of this is your fault." Susan bit her lip until she tasted blood. That afternoon, Lisa stayed with Susan, helping her gather evidence. They printed statements, highlighted suspicious transactions, and began a timeline of David's suspicious behavior. "There," Lisa said, circling a set of dates. "These withdrawals line up exactly with the dates David claimed he was at conferences or golf tournaments. He's not even being careful." Susan whispered, "I thought he was working for our future. Instead, he's living some other life." Lisa's expression grew even graver. "It's worse than money, Susan. There's a pattern. Repeated hotel charges. Expensive dinners in cities he claimed he wasn't in. He might not be alone on these trips." Susan felt as though the floor had vanished beneath her. "No. Don't say that. I have to, Susan. I need you to prepare for that possibility." Susan buried her face in her hands. "I can't believe this. I can't believe the man I married would." Lisa said gently, "You need to protect yourself. Financially. Emotionally. Legally." By evening, Susan was exhausted. Lisa finally left, promising to run a deeper investigation. Susan wandered through the house in a daze, noticing details she'd overlooked for years: the wedding photos on the hallway wall, the pair of his and hers coffee mugs in the cabinet, the anniversary card tucked into the side of the fridge. All these tiny tokens of love, now tainted by suspicion. Was he lying even then? She thought back to the golf trip. He'd called her once during that weekend. She remembered how bright his voice had sounded, how he'd said, "I miss you, babe. Can't wait to be home." Now she wondered if he'd made that call from another woman's hotel room. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to David's breathing beside her. When he shifted closer in his sleep and draped an arm over her waist, she felt her entire body tense. How could a man touch her so tenderly, and yet lie so thoroughly? At around 3 in the morning, she slipped out of bed and crept to her office. She opened her laptop and searched David's name along with some of the suspicious company names from the bank statements. To her horror, she discovered that one of the businesses David had invested in was a luxury travel agency specializing in bespoke romantic getaways. She clicked on a glossy photo of a beach villa in the Maldives, white sands and turquoise water stretching to infinity. The caption beneath it read, "For those moments when you want to escape the world, with the one you love." Susan felt bile rise in her throat. The next morning, David seemed unusually affectionate. He made her coffee, kissed her cheek, and asked if she wanted to take a weekend trip together. "How about a cozy cabin upstate?" he suggested. "Just you and me. We haven't done that in ages." Susan stared at him, noting the way he smiled, how convincingly normal he seemed. A mask. Everything was a mask. She forced a small smile. "That sounds nice." David's grin widened. "Great. I'll make some calls." He left for work, whistling as he closed the door behind him. Susan sank into a kitchen chair, trembling with rage. She dialed Lisa immediately. "Lisa. I want to do it." "Do what?" "Confront him. I can't live like this." "Susan, wait." "No. I have to. I can't sit here pretending. I'll go crazy." Lisa sighed. "Then we do it on your terms. Calm, clear, and with evidence. But remember, he might lie again. Or he might try to turn it around on you." Susan's jaw tightened. Let him try. That afternoon, Susan sat in the living room waiting for David to come home. She felt like a soldier bracing for battle. On the coffee table lay the neat stack of evidence Lisa had helped her compile. Every tick of the wall clock felt like a gunshot in the silence. When David finally arrived, he breezed in with a cheerful, "Hey, beautiful. How was your day?" Susan didn't answer. Instead, she gestured at the coffee table. David paused mid-step, his eyes flicking to the stack of papers. "What's all that?" Susan's voice was low and steady. "Sit down, David. We need to talk." David sat slowly, a cautious look in his eyes. "Susan, what's going on?" She reached for the papers, holding them up like a weapon. "You tell me. What's going on with these transfers? The hotel stays? The romantic travel agency you've been funneling money into?" David's jaw clenched. "Susan, listen." "No," she snapped, slamming the papers down. "Don't talk to me like I'm a child. I know everything. The bank called me. I've seen the records. My inheritance is gone, David. You stole from me. From my parents. From the life we were supposed to have." David's eyes filled with an oily mix of contrition and calculation. "I can explain." "Don't you dare," Susan hissed. "Don't you dare tell me it's for US. You spent my money on God knows what." "On who, David? Was it your golf buddies? Or someone else?" David hesitated. That fraction of a pause told her everything. Susan felt her heart freeze. "So there is someone else." David shook his head violently. "No. Susan, you're blowing this out of proportion. I made some bad investments, that's all. I was trying to surprise you." Susan laughed bitterly. "Surprise me? With bankruptcy? With a mistress?" David reached for her hand, but she jerked away. "Susan, please. I love you. I just made mistakes." Susan rose from the couch, voice shaking with fury. "You destroyed everything I trusted. You've been living another life behind my back. And you know what? I'm not staying quiet. I'm not going to let you ruin me." David's eyes hardened. "Be careful, Susan. You could destroy both of us." Susan glared at him. "Good. Maybe you deserve it." David stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood and walked out, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled on the wall. Susan stood there trembling, every nerve in her body on fire. She felt both terrified and exhilarated. She'd finally said the words out loud. Exposed him. Broken the silence. But now the war had truly begun. The door slammed so hard the house seemed to shudder around Susan. The echoes of David's exit hung in the air, leaving a silence that felt as heavy as concrete. She stood there in the living room, chest heaving, trembling fingers still clenched into fists. All the anger that had fueled her confrontation now crashed into a wave of exhaustion and fear. Her gaze dropped to the coffee table, where the neatly stacked evidence lay scattered from her outburst. Bank statements, highlighted transfers, printouts of the travel agency website, all tangible proof of the double life David had been leading. But behind the rage and betrayal, a voice whispered, "This is far from over." Susan dropped into the armchair, pressing a hand to her temple. Her mind felt like it was spinning in 1,000 directions. How would David retaliate? What other secrets had he kept from her? What if he tried to hide assets, to drain what was left? What if he tried to twist the narrative, make himself the victim, or turn people against her? Her phone buzzed on the table. For a wild moment, she thought it was David. But it was Lisa. "Susan. Are you okay?" Susan took a shaky breath. "He left. I confronted him. He tried to lie, but I didn't let him." Lisa's voice was quiet but strong. "Good. That took courage. Now you have to stay strong. And vigilant." Susan wiped at her eyes. "I don't even know what happens next. We'll handle it. But Susan, he might try to reach you. Or spin some sob story. Don't let him talk you into backing down." Susan nodded, even though Lisa couldn't see her. "I won't. Promise me." "I promise." That night, Susan slept on the couch, unable to bear the thought of their shared bed. She kept jolting awake, haunted by visions of David laughing with some other woman on a tropical beach, sipping champagne bought with her family's legacy. By dawn, her pillow was soaked with tears. 2 days passed without word from David. Susan alternated between surges of icy anger and moments of shattering grief. She couldn't help thinking back to the moments they'd shared over the years, Christmas mornings, summer barbecues, their whispered conversations under the covers. She remembered the look on David's face when he'd proposed, down on one knee in the park where they'd first met. How could that man become the stranger who stole from her? But every memory was now painted over with betrayal. On the 3rd day, the silence broke. Susan was in the kitchen, staring blankly out the window at the bare branches swaying in the autumn wind, when her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Her chest tightened. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Susan." David's voice. She went cold all over. For a moment, she was unable to speak. "Susan, please. Listen to me." Susan's voice was ice. "I have nothing to say to you." "Please," he said, his tone trembling. "I messed up. I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I thought I could make a few quick investments and double our money. I didn't mean to hurt you." Susan clenched her jaw. "Stop lying. You didn't just invest money. You siphoned my inheritance. You lied for months. And don't tell me there wasn't another woman." There was a pause. Then David whispered, "Susan, can we meet? Just talk? Please. We can fix this." Susan felt as though she were staring at a snake coiling around her feet. "Fix it? You stole from me, David. You betrayed everything we built." His voice cracked. "I love you. I can't lose you." Her anger roared back to the surface. "You should have thought of that before you emptied my accounts." "I'll pay it back," he said quickly. "Every cent. I swear." Susan barked out a bitter laugh. "With what money, David? Your mystery investments? Or the next woman's bank account?" David's voice dropped low, trembling. "Please. I'm begging you. If you go public with this, it'll ruin me. My reputation, my job, everything." Susan's eyes flashed. "Good. Maybe you deserve it." He pleaded again. "Don't do this, Susan. Think about what we had." "I am," she said coldly. and I'm done pretending it was real." She hung up. She stood for a long time with the phone in her hand, shaking. Then she took a deep breath, straightened her spine, and called Lisa. "Lisa." "He called me." Lisa's voice sharpened. "What did he say?" "He wants to meet. Begging. Saying he loves me." Lisa snorted. "Of course he is. He's panicking. He knows you have evidence." Susan hesitated. "Should I meet him?" Lisa paused. "Do you want to?" "I want answers. And I want him to know he can't intimidate me." Lisa spoke slowly. "Then meet him. But not alone. Not somewhere private. And record the conversation. And Susan, remember who you're dealing with. He's charming. Manipulative. Don't let him get in your head." Susan nodded, jaw set. "I won't." They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe 2 towns over. Susan arrived early, sitting at a corner table, heart pounding so loudly she thought the entire cafe could hear it. The door jingled, and David walked in wearing a neat navy coat and a sorrowful expression. His eyes were red-rimmed as he slid into the chair opposite her. "Susan. God, you look tired." She stared at him coldly. "So do you." He reached across the table for her hand, but she pulled back sharply. "Susan. Please listen. I was under pressure. Work's been awful. I thought if I could just hit it big, we'd be set for life. I never meant to hurt you." Susan kept her voice even. "So the romantic travel agency? The hotels? The woman you were with in the Maldives? That was all business?" David winced. "It wasn't serious." Susan's voice rose. "Not serious? You used my parents' money to cheat on me, David." Heads in the cafe turned. David lowered his voice, glancing around. "Please. Keep your voice down." "No," Susan said, shaking. "I won't keep my voice down. You stole from me. Lied to me. Slept with someone else while I was planning our anniversary." David's eyes welled up. "Susan. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll sign over assets. I'll go to counseling. Please. Don't go public." Susan's voice broke. "I don't even know who you are." He leaned closer, whispering urgently. "If you go public, I'll lose my business. I'll lose everything. Please, don't do this to me." Susan stared at him for a long moment. Then she stood. "I didn't do this, David." "You did." David grabbed her wrist. "Don't go. Please. I love you." Susan yanked her arm free. "No, David. You love yourself." She walked out of the cafe without looking back. Outside, the cold air hit her like a slap. Her legs were shaking, but each step felt lighter than the last. She called Lisa as soon as she reached her car. "It's over," she said, her voice trembling. "He confessed everything. I have it all recorded." Lisa exhaled. "Good girl. Now we hit him where it hurts. Legally. Financially. You're going to get your life back, Susan." Tears slipped down Susan's cheeks. But this time, they weren't only tears of grief. They were tears of relief and of newfound strength. 6 months later, Susan sat in her sunny kitchen, sipping coffee from a new mug. Across the table sat Lisa, grinning as she closed a file folder. "It's official," Lisa said. "Your settlement is final. The judge awarded restitution of your inheritance. David signed over property, bank accounts, and the divorce is done." Susan let out a shaky laugh. "I can't believe it's real." Lisa raised her coffee cup. "To your new life." Susan lifted hers too, eyes glistening. "To freedom." Susan walked to the window, looking out over her garden, where green shoots were pushing through the thawing soil. For a moment, she thought of David, the man she once believed would protect her forever. But instead of heartbreak, she felt only a quiet, steely peace. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out how strong you really are. She turned away from the window, sunlight catching her hair. A small smile played across her lips as she stepped back into her kitchen, ready to begin again.